Now we're up on a mountain overlooking the east and the west at Karnei Shomron, and we're going to hear from one of the directors of this settlement. This is a community, Michael, who happens to be a Columbia-trained lawyer who has emigrated into Israel as an Israeli citizen. This is going to be a most fascinating. Listen carefully. You're going to hear at the end the solution to the Arab-Israeli problem. Here we go. Check this out.
Our two hills. We will be going on to the southern hill. These two hills are called the Horns of Samaria, or in Hebrew, Karnei Shomron. And that's the name, the name of our town is named after these two hills.
Below is the neighborhood of Neve Menachem. This is the third neighborhood of our town council. It was built in 1991. One hill over is Karnei Shomron. That was established in 1977, and the hill after that is Ginot Shomron, where we had left earlier today, and that was established in 1985. And then in the distance you see the coastal region. Down below, where I'm pointing, you have the Karnei Shomron houses, and on the other side you have other houses. That's the settlement of Nofim. When we stand on this hilltop, you can easily understand the importance of controlling this hilly area. Imagine to yourself if the enemy of the state were to have a simple mortar shell which can shoot, say, 2 kilometers, the damage that he can do. If you have something a little more sophisticated, or laser-guided missiles, someone standing on this hilltop in order to guide a missile into Tel Aviv, into Herzliya, this hilltop controls the coastal area of Israel. If we were not here, then the question is, who would be here? This is why we feel that in addition to having a purpose to settle the land of Israel, we also understand that our purpose here is also to protect the remaining part of the state of Israel, and that we do merely by staying on this hilltop. Okay, so the point was being made in terms of the more global perspective, in terms of what Israel does for the Western world. And Israel, without a doubt, Israel is the buffer. Towards our east, we have Syria, and we have Iran, very moderate countries, right? And we have Pakistan, and we have Russia not so far from here. Israel is the country which the West has to rely on in order to keep these forces from the West. That's a factual reality, and Israel does it with pleasure. And she does it very well.
I've heard it said that Israel's the eastern front of Western civilization.
Yes, yes, that's well framed. The question was asked, what would happen if Israel were not to maintain control of this area? And it's simply a nightmare. It's simply a nightmare. In order to maintain an independent state in the pre-67 areas, you all saw the map, is physically impossible. Israel had an immense difficult time between 1948 and 1967 as a state. It was not able to flourish economically and spiritually all that much. It was very much limited by the fact that it was caged in to very difficult borders. After the 67 war, after the Six-Day War, Israel was able to flourish. And that's what we were able to see. In other words, the flourishing of Israel basically occurred after the 1967 areas. And it's clear to see that all this area, everything that we see, the green line, just so you understand where it would be, the green line is a little after these low-lying hills. And then immediately you have the coastal region, which is very tight population. And what we saw when we had a withdrawal from Gaza Strip, and basically the Arabs set up Hamastan and they shoot missiles. If those missiles were to be shot from here, we're not talking about sophisticated missiles. Yes, it's true that they have missiles that can go hundreds of kilometers, but it's a whole different ball game when you have simple missiles that can go 10 kilometers and hit Kfar Sava or hit Herzliya. It's a whole different ball game, because then every idiot and his brother can manufacture a missile of that type in his basement. Believe me, it is not difficult to produce a missile. steel tubing, and you stuff in the chemicals on the backside, and you have yourself a missile. And if it's something primitive, but shot from a hill like here, you can do horrible devastation. And so it's critical that Israel control this area. And needless to say, if it were a guerrilla base in terms of spying on Israel, all different ramifications, conventional warfare becomes impossible if this area, if this hilltop becomes controlled by the enemy. Now, if you want,
what happens to your community if Obama wins and you have to go?
All right. See, I don't like to go there, but unlike my nature, I'll be a little pessimistic. Listen, I had a house in Gush Katif. I've always lived in, yes. I'll explain what is Gush Katif. Gush Katif was the area in the Gaza Strip. There were 21 Jewish communities in the Gaza Strip.
We were there yesterday, by the way.
You were near there, right. Because in 2005, Israel pulled out the 21 communities from the Gaza Strip and moved them into Israel. From a social perspective, it was an utter disaster. And we're only talking about 8,000 families, okay? 8,000 people. 8,000 people. We're talking about a number of people a little larger than Karnei Shomron, okay? That's all of Gush Katif. My friends, what can I tell you? Some of the children fell to drugs, a very high proportion of divorce. When you're age 50 and you suddenly lose your business, one of my closest friends was the electrician for the Gush Katif communities. The withdrawal from Gush Katif occurred when he was 51, 52, and suddenly all his client base went, because all his client base were the Jewish communities living there, and suddenly he had to find a new job. And to find a new job at age 51, 52 is horrible. And the impact that we are still suffering today. And so imagine if you take that situation, and let's say they decide to do a withdrawal of 80,000 people. Are they crazy? You're going to multiply the problem by 10? And 80,000 people, just so you understand, in Judea, Samaria, excluding eastern Jerusalem, just Judea and Samaria alone, we're talking about 500,000 people. So let's say they decide only to do 80,000 people. So instead of $1 billion, it's going to be $10 billion. And the disaster in terms of the military disaster, I wouldn't want to go down that dark path of what it would cause. Israel cannot protect itself if there were a withdrawal from this area. Period. Israel would not be able to protect itself. The West would be shooting itself in the head if they were to demand Israel to withdraw from these areas. It's nothing short of taking a cyanide pill. It is impossible to defend this. Israel would not be able to survive such a withdrawal, and the West would ultimately collapse to the forces of radical Islam. Daesh would simply cut the head off of the President of the United States, without a doubt. That would be the ultimate end of what would occur here. Jordan survives because of Israel. Jordan, King Abdullah lives in deathly fear. What has occurred because of the chaos in Syria is approximately 1 million Syrian refugees have fled into Jordan. Talking about a country of 3 million people. Now, a quarter of Jordan presently are these refugees who don't have homes, who don't have finances, are desperate, and are bloodthirsty. Okay? Imagine living in a country where suddenly 1/4 of your population are very, very disgruntled and very violent. King Abdullah survives only because Israel is keeping him alive. King Abdullah has false dreams. He thinks that he was going to be saved by these prior elections, and he thinks that Israel will somehow provide some solution to the Palestinian Arabs and alleviate him of his problem, because he has a much bigger Palestinian Arab problem. He, after all, he's Saudi. He is Saudi. He's Hashemite. He's not Palestinian. 20% of Jordan is Hashemite. 80% of Jordan is Palestinian Arab. His Palestinian Arab problem is much bigger. Now, if we're talking demographics, let's talk about demographics of Israel, because that's perhaps one of the biggest farce that the world likes to throw at us. Since 1967, To today, approximately 1/3 of the Israeli population from the Jordan River to the sea, 1/3 is non-Jewish, 2/3 is Jewish. That's a stable population. It's been that way since 1967 to date. To date. And I'm including the areas of Judea and Samaria, the West Bank. Clear and simple. When they talk about illegal settlements, we're not talking about stealing land. They're not saying that we took this land from some Arab, from some individual. The land, in fact, was bought by Moshe Zar from an Arab in Jinsafut. The problem is the paperwork wasn't complete, and the other part of the land was the Jordanian army base. We're not talking about stealing land. Believe it or not, when they're talking about the legal problem of the outposts, they're talking about zoning law. It's no more complicated than if you choose to suddenly build an additional room to your house. Zoning law. And we're not within the variances. That's it. That's it in a nutshell. That's what's going on. And I guess the big question, I'll take answers in it. The big question is, we talk about demographics and we talk about legality, but I always get back to our kids. When Theodor Herzl came to the Holy Land in 1900 and said, here will be reestablished the Jewish state, we're talking about a Jewish minority of under 10%. Under 10%. When David Ben-Gurion declared the state of Israel in 1948, we were a minority in Israel, 33%, minority. This didn't prevent these dreamers from doing what had to be done and from declaring what had to be declared. It's that identical spirit which motivates us, the population here in Judea and Samaria. And that's why we salute our kids. And that's why we know what has to be done. But at the end of the day, what really is determined is what I said, the legal aspect. The end of the day is that book which most of the people of the world accept. And it's called the Bible. We have a burning sensation. We know that we have returned to our sensual homeland and that we have a purpose in life to reestablish and ensure that the state of Israel survive and that the Jewish people expand and create an amazing state. And I think despite all the criticism that the world shows us, I still believe, and it's sad that the world can't see it, but they're not going to rain on my parade, because what I see a country with the strongest army in the world, a country with the strongest technology in the world, a country with the strongest medical advances in the world, a country with the strongest economy in the world. Look at Europe. Look at the United States. We're not suffering the same economics. My personal belief, because God shines on our parade. The world wants to rain on my parade. It's not going to work. It's not going to happen.
It's the
Palestinian and Israeli.
The solution is internal. We will solve this problem. There really isn't a problem. I'm a lawyer. 80% of my work is dealing with Arabs. I represent the Arab collaborators, the Arabs who collaborate with the Israeli Defense Ministry. For over 20 years, I'm the expert in Israel on that issue. I guess if you want a nice term, it's called spy law. When I tell you that the vast majority of the Arabs in Jinsafut, in Kalkilia, in Shechem want Israeli rule, you can be sure they want Israeli rule. They're not idiots. They know which side their bread is buttered. They know where they will be able to work in peace, where their children will get education, where they'll be able to get medical health care, where they're going to look towards Syria as a beacon to the world. They're going to look towards Iran as a beacon of democracy, or to Egypt as a beacon of bread production. They're not idiots. They look at what's going on in the rest of the Arab countries, and they know they also want Israeli rule. The solution is when our leaders, the Israeli leaders, wake up and realize they just have to make the decision. Annex the area and bring full Israeli rule to this area. And Israel will continue growing as it has grown over the past 66 years.